just go ahead, start recording, and then, yeah, hopefully you'll be happy with us. Fingers crossed. So I guess today, Bill, wanted to start in regards to one of your books, You Are the Universe. I spent some time reading a few of the chapters in that and wanted to bring, actually, it was the very first chapter when you talked about the questions, and I found that quite I found it quite what's the word? It's like eye-opening, or it definitely was a catalyst for me in terms of thoughts, and it brought me back to when I started to ask all these questions around who am I, where am I, what is this world that we're living in, what is my purpose here? And I guess, just for maybe anybody listening, can you talk a little bit about when that happened to you and what you started questioning?
I think, my earliest memories were questioning, what is going on here? What is this? Everybody takes it for granted, like they're acting very blasé, like they know what it's, but they're not explaining it to me. They didn't give me any manual, or they didn't think I was up to it, or they didn't want to talk over my head, and I figured I was like any other kid. I'm just gonna want to have fun, but I wasn't like any other kid that I ever met. I was trying to figure out life. It was I don't know how old I was. It must have been before I was 4.
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of crazy to think, even at that young age, that you had started to have those questions like popping up. Why am I here? What am I doing? Because when I was reading your book, it kind of ignited for me. I actually really remember it. It was between like a Christmas. It was like, you just go through life and you're like churning, doing what everybody else does. And I remember I started asking the questions. It was between like a Christmas break from work, actually, right? And, work had stopped and we had this kind of pause of like, 10 days, 2 weeks downtime. And I remember thinking, there's only so many times you can go to eat, like go to the cinema and, go for a drink. And I was thinking, what are we all here for? And I remember it quite clearly. So it's interesting. So for you, what triggered that questioning? Was it just, what triggered it?
I had this pervasive sense that what was going on was unusual, and it was very self-confident. It, meaning all the people around me, it knew what it was about and never questioned it, or apparently so, because no one was addressing any of the questions that were occurring to me, like who am I and what is an I? What does it even mean? And the whole thing struck me as very unusual, and it also was amazing. It was, why is this happening? Why isn't something else happening? It could be different. Why is it this way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't really put it into words to ask my parents. My parents were very open people, and I could have asked them any question, but I couldn't even form coherent questions about it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even sure that I was asking questions. I wasn't sure what was going on. I just had this sense of amazement and endless questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I asked the easy questions,
Mm-hmm.
the questions that, who is that guy? And is he in the band? And what instrument does he play? Or, whatever it might be. That stuff, I was constantly asking questions, driving my parents crazy, but they were very patient and answered all those questions. If I could have actually phrased the questions, the existential questions that were just the most important thing in life to me, and have always been, it's always been that way. if I could have phrased them well, they probably would have told me whatever they could, whatever their view was. And that would have been fascinating, but I missed that opportunity.
Mm.
I'm going to ask them next time I see them.
Definitely. I know. And it's funny, actually, as you were saying that, you know, you remember feeling this way as a child and questioning things. And it was just this morning, actually. We were working on like a training, you know, a training like class or master class around powerful questioning. And there was a stat that came up about kids ask the most questions. They ask, like, I think it was on average 390 questions a day. So I don't think that you're unique in like being young and questioning everything. And I'm sure for anyone that's had a kid or been around a kid, you know that they do. They find wonder in everything.
Yeah, at that point, I can see the wonder. In my case, it was also awe. I was in awe of how's this stuff, who organized all this? What, this is a very complex thing. Whatever it is, it's very complicated. And will I ever really be able to figure all of it out? You know, I better get started. And, you know, so I made whatever progress I could, and that's still the case.
And I think when we think of us as you know, as children, as young children, I actually think that is the state that we're actually meant to be in before all this kind of programming and conditioning, you know, starts to take place. So it's actually, when you say it's no wonder you were questioning things as a child, because actually we should all be questioning, like, why are we here? What are we here to do? What is the purpose? Who are you? And yeah, I think obviously you started questioning very, very young, and I know that's led you on a kind of lifelong kind of discovery of this. But for somebody that is maybe just starting to question what they're here to do and maybe feeling quite kind of confused, what would your advice be to them?
This great opportunity. It's like a big canvas, their life. They can do anything they want with it. And, you know, what are they going to do with that fantastic opportunity? Particularly being young, having a whole panorama of your life ahead. So they should be excited and have an exalted feeling of freedom and power to construct, design this beautiful life. And then they should beware of negativity. You know, like the George Harrison song, Beware of Darkness, that they should look out for being depressed or sad or anxious or stressed or any of those negative feelings. And while they're on the road to planning their life, figuring out their mission, they shouldn't let anything distort that beauty, the beauty of that positive process. They shouldn't let perhaps a sense of defeatism, like, oh, I could never do that, or, oh, that sounds too tough, or, yeah, that's a dream, I'm never going to get there, blah, blah. Those kinds of things, they should inspect them objectively, like a scientist or a lawyer, trying to, you know, what's the evidence? What do I know? What don't I know? If I have a strong intention and a strong desire for a certain kind of a life, I've got all these years to figure it out. I can learn things. I can do little tests and experiments. I can be cautious. I can get there. There's step-by-step ways of doing it, as long as I stay positive and stay focused on what do I really want to do? What do I want to make of myself? What do I want to leave behind that the world doesn't have now? Do I want to invent something? Or do I want to be a role model for kids? Or do I want to teach? Or do I want to learn? Or do I want to do both of those things? Or Do I want to perform? Do I want to perform music? Do I want to sing? Do I want to dance? Do I want to write? Do I want to be a lawyer or a doctor? Do I want to be an engineer? Do I want to write software code? What is it? What intrigues me? What seems interesting? Because ultimately, there are some strong clues to what our mission is. Our mission has to be related to stuff that delights us, stuff that we love doing. That's a clue. If we love doing something, that's a strong clue. Write it down, make sure, clue number one, I really enjoy this. Not good at it, but I really enjoy it. Also, another clue is, this is something I didn't particularly enjoy, but I was really good at it. That's another clue. I can't just discard that just because I don't like it. Maybe I didn't like it in that context, but maybe I would love it in another context. But things that I'm good at and things that I love, make a list and keep adding to the list as you think of new things or as you discover new things. Because, a very young person hasn't experienced a lot of different things. So many of the things that they might love doing or do quite well, they haven't even tried yet or don't even know exist yet.
It's kind of not only to be kind of questioning the world around you, but actually questioning yourself and asking yourself these kind of questions. They talk about questioning and the power of questioning. There's like surface level questions, kind of like, how are you? How was your day? And then there's, those deeper level questions that like, what drives you or what gets you up every morning? And for somebody that's maybe needing to explore themselves and their passions a little deeper, what advice would you give them to be like crafting those deeper kind of questions so that they really dig deep and find out what's inside?
That's a wonderful question. They have to start by observing themselves, because in order to ask a person, somebody else, a question, you have to have some notion of who that person is, what they might know. You're not going to ask them a question that's something they couldn't possibly know or they're unlikely to know. So you're like that other person. They have to first know a little bit about themselves in order to know what questions to ask themselves. Certainly the first two are, what am I good at and what do I love doing? Those are, basic, but they should observe themselves. They should observe, how do they decide what to do when they've got a couple of different choices to make? Do they take their time? Do they have time pressure, real time pressure? Like, are the parents the kind of people who rush them into making decisions? Or do they give them time to make decisions? And then what's the decision process? How do they make those decisions? Is it what's going to make mommy and daddy like me more or respect me more, or what's going to delight them, or what's going to delight me, or I better not do that because it's going to make my sister or brother jealous because that's what they do. They should see, what's their decision process now when they're faced with choices. So a little bit of observing oneself, they'll be able to ask better questions of themselves.
So understanding yourself or exploring yourself more is the key to asking good questions.
I think it's part of it. The other is having some kind of a map, like the following. They should consider that not every voice in their head, assuming that they're thinking in words, which most people do, that's a whole nother subject, but they're not all the same level of intelligence. They're not all coming from the same place. Some of their thoughts and feelings and impulses are coming from their deep inner self, their real me that was born. And then some of the stuff that they say to themselves is really repetition of imitative repetition of something somebody said to them. Some of those voices in their mind are just recordings of other people. And they should be able to, when they ask themselves a question, they should know, is this a question coming from my real self? Before I got conditioned and talked into all kinds of things by a lot of people without me even realizing that I'm being conditioned. And then when I answer the question, where's the answer coming from? Is the answer also coming from the true me? Or is it being influenced by all these people and things around me that have influenced me? So in the questioning process, they have to know a little bit more about themselves, and then why they're asking that particular question. They have to understand, why am I asking this question? And then when they get the answer, the first answer may not be the right answer, although often the very, very first answer is coming from their real self. But they have to follow the action of their own minds very closely because it moves quickly. Sometimes you get a first impulse and you know what the answer is from your heart. But within a fraction of a second, another one comes in and it's very persuasive and it's talking loud and it seems to be authoritative, and you go that way. And it wasn't really the first thing that happened. So watching your mind closely is very helpful in knowing what questions to ask and how to interpret the question coming back, whether it's a real answer from you or it's a fake answer that's been kind of hammered into you.
Yeah, so the real answer is the one coming from your true self. But obviously, as we know, very quickly then comes all the limiting beliefs, all the things that, all the other voices, the fear, the voice that's trying to keep you safe, the devil on the shoulder then starts. But in terms of the true self, it made me think of the term like authenticity. And I think people talk about being authentic quite a lot, but I'm not sure that people necessarily always understand what it is to be authentic, because people will say, well, I am being myself, but they don't realize the areas of which within themselves that they are still conditioned. So people are like, well, I am being authentic, I am being me, but there's elements of themselves that are actually conditioning that they don't even realize is conditioning. So, for somebody that wants to be more authentically them, and I guess follow this true self within, how do they start to, I guess, understand which part of their selves isn't authentically them?
Another great question. The mask or persona that we want to project to other people is something that we pick up as a child very early on, because we sense that other people are doing it, that they are sugarcoating what's really going on inside of them to be more acceptable socially to other people. And so the child quickly picks up, oh, this is probably a good idea for me to fit in this way. And everybody's protecting themselves by being kind of trying to make themselves out to be something better than they might actually be inside, which is kind of an aspirational thing. It seems like a positive thing. Anyway, whatever subconscious processes go on in our heads, it isn't that explicit. We're not really scientists at that age, but we are tremendous seers of what's going on and hearers of what we hear and feelers, and we have tremendous instinct and intuition. And so we get in the game, we get in the flow of what other people are doing, of having masks and trying to impress each other. And it takes years for them to come up with any kind of an external experience or internal experience that wakes them up to the fact that they're masking themselves and they're not being totally real. And it takes them a very long time, and maybe they never reach this point where they realize that when they do unself-protectively let it come out, what they're really feeling, that it's much more successful, that it impresses people. People sense the authenticity. Therefore, it's compellingly persuasive that whatever you're saying, maybe you're wrong, maybe you don't know the facts or whatever, but at least you're being totally honest and candid and frank. And then, of course, there's the issue of bluntness and negativity. Like, you don't just want to let out bad things. You don't want to bring other people down. You can be pretty sure that if this impulse inside of you is negative, it's probably not coming from your real self, because your real self tends to be very objective and doesn't get sucked into wallowing in self-pity or being angry or vengeful or envious or resentful or any of that stuff. That stuff is coming from the ego. It's coming from the conditioned part, not from the underlying deep self. So you have to realize all of that stuff going on. But I find the word unself-protective or non-self-protective or stop being self-protective and just tell the truth. And that's a simpler way to say the same thing. But then a child or an adult will raise the objection, well, I got a job to protect. I've got a mortgage. I've got this and that and the other thing. And if I just tell the truth, even if I'm nice and I'm diplomatic about it, I'm going to offend the boss because I want to do X. And the boss absolutely has ruled out X. No, we're not going to be doing X. Get it out of your heads. So if I'm going to be completely non-self-protective, I'm going to tell them, I understand you're against this, but I'd like your permission to tell you why I think we should reconsider that, and so on and so forth. But there is risk in being non-self-protective, and people tend to be risk averse. Why should I risk? Why should I risk? Just for some principle of authenticity is good? Well, it's very nice, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to protect myself. I've got 5 more years and then I'll get my retirement. I get my package. I'll be able to take care of blah, blah, blah. I can play golf all day, etc. Whatever. And I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing because it seems to be working. I'm not going to move out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny how you say about like when you are your most authentic self, or you're not self-protective or self-defensive, I think you said, you actually become very successful at stuff. And I always say, the more authentically you are, the more magnetic you are. And it's almost like your authenticity is your blueprint, like in this world. And actually, it's a shame because if more people did follow it, then they would find that they would attract more things with ease, because it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? It's like, oh, well, we should fit in, we should stay safe, we should do all these things. But actually, when you are the most authentic version of yourself, people can feel that. It's not even, when I think about it, it's like, say, for instance, running a business, and I could be doing, or somebody could be doing the exact same thing, but the people are different. And if somebody is the more authentic version of themselves, their business is going to be more successful, I believe, because I believe it's kind of your blueprint, that this is why you're here in the world, to be authentically yourself. Do you feel the same?
I do. I think that there's much more flow state in it when you're authentic, when you're letting your inside flow to the outside, and it's all one thing together. That we could all be doing our passion work. We'd all be giving maximum value to each other. If you can look at the world as these 8 billion people. Are they round pegs in round holes, or are they in the wrong slot? Most of them are in the wrong slot. We don't have the education system is misnamed. It should be the memorization system. You know, we test on, could people memorize the key things we want them to memorize, because that's what they're graded on. And if the grades aren't good enough, then they're going to be left back and blah, 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 blah. But we're not trying to educare means to draw out. That's the Latin root of education. It's not putting in, it's drawing out what's inside. If we had an education system, we would be spending most of the first 5 years of the system trying to help the kid figure out who they really are, what they want to do in this world, what their mission is. We'd be helping them draw out their mission, and then they could authentically fit the right hole, you know, to go in, square, round, triangle, whatever it might be. And then we'd be giving each other the best possible service. Each one of us would be radiating, you know, wonderful, whatever it is, pizzas or, you know, screenplays, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
We'd be getting the best out of everyone, and everyone would enjoy it the most.
Definitely. And as you're talking there, it makes me think a lot, right, about, because if everybody's like, I guess there's an argument to say, like, if everyone was following their passion work, would there be anybody, you know, sweeping the streets or you know, working in McDonald's or whatever it is? I guess there's an argument to that. But then I don't know why this just popped into my mind right now. You know, there's obviously the whole talk about AI and how it's, you know, going to automate a lot of kind of, you know, repetitive jobs that, you know, that can be probably done by robots, because it's not necessarily, you don't need to think to do it. And there's, you know, a lot of fear around that. But as you were talking there, and, you know, imagining a world where we're all following our passion work, could it be a good thing that actually a lot of those kind of mundane jobs are taken, so that there is more space to explore? What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, yes, there's this fear we have that AIs are going to become smarter than us, and then we're in trouble. That's really pretty far away. You know, what AIs are really good for now is seeming smart, but all they're doing is collating stuff that humans have said, written or said, and it's kind of like autofill, like you type part of a word and the rest of the word comes in. That's essentially the same thing that the large language models are doing. They're autofilling what's the most likely thing that the groupthink would say next in the sentence after these first three words. I wouldn't, you know, get too frightened about that as being potentially a true conscious intelligence that is going to compete with us. I'm kind of inventing a new thing I call human intelligence. It's HI. Hi. It's like we got AI and we're putting all this effort into it and billions of dollars. Could we put, you know, a few million into HI? Especially if we're afraid of the competition from AI. Great. Let's channel that fear into accomplishment. You know, let's get rid of the fear by building up HI. The stronger HI is, the less it has to fear from AI.
Focus on the solution, not the problem, right?
Right. Turning problems into solutions.
Exactly. And then in terms of focusing on human intelligence, what do we as a planet need to do in order to do that, in order to focus our energy there instead?
Well, science has to become more open-minded about, which is ironic because science is supposed to be objective search for truth, but science as practiced needs to become more aware of the potential for the scientific application of introspection. That introspection can be very, very enlightening. And if we just try to measure brainwaves and fMRI and biometrics and all these peripheral things, we will learn things. But those things will be very fragmentary and not too pragmatically applicable. but if we connect them with the introspective experience of those things. So the default network is something that science has discovered. But it's only recently, it's only in the last few years that they've discovered these 12 networks, one of which is called the default network. The default network is the exact same thing as an emergency oversimplification procedure that I described going back half a century. So introspection was a half a century ahead of science, only because science ignores introspection. If they put it together with their measurements, bang, it's going to tremendously speed up HI.
Yeah, and I know that I think last time we talked about science starting to become, they can't actually deny that that they're around, you know, consciousness and all these things that happen that perhaps don't have like a scientific, you know, answer. It's not always 1 + 1 = 2, and hopefully that acceleration in science, along with, you know, the mission work that many of us are doing, I feel, down here to, you know, make this world a better place. I really am hopeful that we're going to make a big difference to people. I think following the pandemic as well, I think that shifted so many people. And I think sometimes through the biggest hardships, actually that's when, you know, these awakenings and the questions, as you had said in your book, You Are the Universe, that's when people actually started asking these questions, and that can only accelerate this human intelligence that you speak of.
Agree, yes. The universe, being conscious and intelligent, might have allowed the pandemic to happen knowing that there would be these positive outcomes. It might not just be accidentally beneficial. You know, every cloud has a silver lining, maybe because the whole system is intelligent.
I believe that. I believe that, and I think we're very aligned in our thinking. In terms of the book, you know, You Are the Universe, you talked about the energy computer and how you know, there is almost like this supercomputer that is an extension of all of us, really, and that, you know, sometimes it's called God, but you talked of the depiction of God and how many of us don't necessarily relate to that because of how we're told that this man looks and who he's meant to be. But thinking of it as a computer, and obviously it's much more complex than that, knowing that, or on the theory that we are all connected to this, and if we are all an extension of this computer, then actually we are all here to help and serve one another. If more people kind of were able to take that on board, that idea or that concept, how do you think that would change the way people interact with others if they knew that they were actually an extension of themselves rather than a separate identity? How do you think that would change things?
Very positively. We would be cooperative rather than competitive. This whole competition thing is really a defensive move. And anything defensive is coming from the ego, is coming from this sub-self. It's like an inner AI. It's like our personal computer in the brain. And it's not really us. It's making suggestions to us, like autofill. And so, you know, we have to choose carefully, you know, which of these things forming in our mind are worthy of our acting out versus just letting them float downstream and moving on to, you know, choosing a different impulse to follow, a higher impulse to follow. I think the world there's no reason that I can think of why nations have to have the current pugnacious stance toward one another.
Mhm.
There's really no need for that. We've got, each country has its own resources, does what things that it does best, just like people. And we can exchange these things with each other in a happy way. It doesn't have to be competitive. The competitive thing is all based on sense of fear and inner incompetence and incompleteness. And I don't think we would have this feeling of incompleteness if we realized that we're an extension of God.
One another.
We're extension of the animating principle of the universe.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's us
Mhm.
coming out through these avatars, you and me and all the other avatars. So there's divinity in us,
Mhm.
and there's grace all around us. The universe is helping us. Whenever we go into flow state, it's the universe helping us.
Mhm.
It's, that little piece of the universe is now flowing just perfectly. It's completely up to par of where it should be, as opposed to being something a little imperfect and marred here and there by, sin actually means missing the mark, basically. So these little sins of missing, not quite living up to the perfection, aren't flow state. And when we actually do live up to the potential that the universe recognizes as this is the way it should be, then the universe pitches in and makes us feel like we're exceeding our own capabilities. We call it the flow state, but it would be all flow state if we were all cooperating with each other, if we all recognized each other as part of the same one thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think it would be a much happier planet.
Mm. Yeah, the idea of us actually all to coexist and collaborate with one another, and that's not just in a workplace, right? You talk, as high up as like countries, like working with each other, and as you were talking about different countries and people from all over the world, that's why I love to travel, because I genuinely believe like travel broadens the mind, and when you see more of the world, you realize just what a little part that you have been occupying. And as you were talking there about collaboration amongst different countries, I kind of had this thought. Could you imagine if people, I'm not saying me and you should be president or anything like that, but however, if people like us, or that thought kind of in this way around collaboration and, unity, if we had people like that in positions of leadership and power, how impactful would that be for our planet?
I think it would have as much impact in the opposite direction as Trump.
Mhm.
You know, these people in power are very influential without half trying, and everything's in favor of someone in that position getting their notion of reality across to other people, tens of millions. And if we could give our trainings to people who are open to it and could move into that space, that would be a step in the right direction. Which is why whenever the Army or the Navy called upon me to give workshops, and they said, we can't pay $500 an hour like industry's paying you and blah blah. I said, I don't care. I don't want any money. I live for this. Sure, bring it on. Let's do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if the White House wanted me to come in, I wouldn't ask for them to pay my hotel or travel costs. Be happy to do it, because what could be better than trying to get world leaders to try to get into the more enlightened headspace, even to just open their minds to the possibility of it.
Mhm. Definitely, and 100%. I think about, you know, this, it brings up all sorts of connotations for me. So obviously, you know, the work that I'm doing, it's, you know, with leaders and also with education, right? So I talk about being a leader or a manager in an organization, or even a teacher. Like, you have tremendous like power to influence people in a positive way. And, you know, I think of a teacher, they influence the kids positively. Like a manager or a leader can influence people they can have such a positive impact on people's lives, right? And it's the same in, you know, positions of power, whether it be in politics or you know, world leaders. They actually have a huge privilege, and it's, and with that, like, because you have that ability to influence, positively influence so many people. And like, that shouldn't, I don't think, be something that you should take lightly. Like, that's a huge position of privilege, and shouldn't be, you know, abused, really. And I think, what do you think? I'm interested. What are your thoughts around that? There is kind of a reason that they want to keep people like me and you away from influencing others. How does it serve them to continue down this route, you know, where they are maybe self-serving, or they are, you know, all about control or divisiveness? How does that serve them to keep people like me and you and the work that we're doing away from that?
Yeah, well, it's complicated because there are some people, for example, in the US, the fundamentalist Christian part of the US population, who you might say would be against what we're saying, they've been drawn to my books.
Mm.
I never expected that. What they're drawn to is the fact that I'm attesting to the scientific possibility of God, which they see as what they want to happen. They're driven by the fear that God is going away, that God is going away, but that the population is turning away from God, and they'll do anything to stop that from happening. So weirdly enough, I don't think that they're trying to necessarily muffle us, but they're who have risen to power are the people who have been attracted to power. And the founders of America, like George Washington, he didn't view being the president of the United States as a way to be powerful or to be able to make money or to take advantage or self-aggrandizement or any of that. It was a humble job, a post somebody had to do, which also involved a lot of personal risk and very little reward. And it was public servant kind of a mentality. It was only 20 years later when it started to get like this, where the parties formed. The political parties weren't there for 20 years. 20 years into the game, all of a sudden it started to move in this direction. And it was all about power for its own sake.
Yeah.
Now, in the system that evolved in India a long time ago called the chakra system, or its modern Western reduction into the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, power is a step along the way. You know, in the Indian system, it's survival. Then when survival is assured, then you want something beyond that, and that turns out to be pleasure, sex, and all of the forms of hedonism. And then what's the next step after that? It's power. After you've had enough, you know, great meals and great sex, and, you know, what else is there? The next step is power. But that's only a step, because after that comes love. Once you discover love, you're not such a power maniac anymore. So all these people who have risen to power have basically not quite gotten to the love stage yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's creativity and self-knowledge, and then there's transcending the self, and that's the evolutionary process. So they're stuck, and the power, and they'll do anything to have power as an end in itself. Give up democracy in order for my party to have power.
Mm-hmm.
That's, they're not going to be happy if they get that. They don't know that, and they wouldn't ever accept it in advance, but it wouldn't be a happy ending. It's all self-deceptive. It isn't, they don't understand themselves deeply enough. It's too much the ego. It's not enough of the me that was born. The me that was born is buried
Mm-hmm.
under this powerful ego focused on power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I see that it's like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're stuck on a certain part of the pyramid, and you have to get back caring about yourself to like care for others. And I see that, and sometimes I see, I don't know whether it is, this universe is a bit of a mirror and you attract what you are, right? But I see so many people, or I'm lucky enough to have people around me now that are very much like past that stage, past that stage of, caring about themselves and power and all that kind of stuff. And it makes me think like these people are, are everywhere actually. Like they are everywhere when, you attract that kind of person in. And it just makes me think, it's like, is politics or, and then just, using politics, but it could be, any high position of power. Are all those people congregating there because they attract what they are almost? Because I kind of think if you had somebody like you in that kind of setting, that it almost would seem quite alien because they're almost attracting what they are. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are people everywhere that have got past that stage in the pyramid, but why are they never in positions of power? It doesn't seem that they're in positions of power.
Yet, I think that's true. But I think there may have been people like that in positions of power. And I'm thinking again of the founders of the USA, for example, or the people who wrote the Magna Carta, or Jesus Christ, or I mean, those people had power. Maybe not during their lifetimes, in the case of Jesus, but there have been. But maybe more recently, there've been people like Eisenhower or FDR in terms of U.S. presidents who were inspirational to others because they seemed to be coming from a higher place of looking for win-win solutions and not out for themselves or for self-aggrandizement. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, a transcendental meditation teacher back then, 70s. He predicted that when we, people like us, get to, I think he said 1% of the population, that would cause the change. That would be the turning point. So whether it's 1%, 3%, 10%, whatever it might be, I think in principle, of course, he's right. And because we're not necessarily attracted to positions of power, nor are people who are getting other people into working for them, looking for people like us. They should be, but they're more looking for people who have real world experience in some, very important basic thing like the right foreign languages or the knowledge of the right foreign cultures or military skills or engineering skills or basic science skills or things that could be more obviously employed by a government in the world the way it is today. Can't blame them for that. The way the world is set up right now, spending most of our money on military on weapons. And there's really only, if you keep going in that direction, where the momentum is going, we know where that's going to end up. It's not going to be good. And turning that away from that bad ending into a good ending is quite a task. I've been failing at it now for decades. But, failing in this case means small incremental improvements, a person at a time, out of 8 billion, it's working. But the projected, when do we get to the tipping point is the real question. If Maharishi was right and we only have to get to 1%, we may already be there. Maybe we just have to all communicate with each other, find each other, set up a thing, the Human Race Club. That was one of my concepts. Or do you think like this? Let's all join together. Let's know about each other. Let's have a group, on social media, but whatever it might be. I think it would be a good idea. Maybe we could speed up the process.
Yeah. I definitely myself, I feel an escalation in it. And again, I don't know whether it's just the people you tend to then attract in, because I feel like everybody's waking up now. Like, I feel like everybody's thinking, why am I doing this? What is my purpose? They're not, especially the newer generation, like, Gen Z is coming in. They really are like, I'm not putting up with this. Why should I do that? And people call them, work shy, whatever. They just are not going to do the things that the generations before, put up with. They don't have that same level of, fear or, attachment to a job or, that kind of thing. I really feel that it's picking up pace, and I don't know if it's just, again, the people, because I'm sure there's people everywhere that are, in having a very bad time and a negative time, and like things are going wrong. But if we only need to get to like 1 to 2%, as long as we all follow our mission and like, as long as we act on it, I think that's the biggest thing. People are waking up, but are you acting on it? I think action is critical, isn't it? Because it does require all of us. It requires you to do your actions, like me to do mine. And it's actually our responsibility, I believe, for future generations to come.
I agree. I probably was overly optimistic in the 70s. Because I saw the roots of this were beginning. People were learning more about themselves. They were going to EST, or they were going to Eureka Institute, or they would, Silver Mind Control. All of that was bubbling up in the 70s. So it gave me great hope. And a lot of those people then went into businesses and continued to try to do good. One company, Apple and Eve, was like the first really healthy juices with all the right ingredients and natural organic ingredients and none of the bad stuff. And those were people that came to some of my workshops in the 70s and so on. But then in the 80s, a lot of those people that I knew that seemed to be getting it, a lot of my friends wound up on Wall Street, and went into finance and stuff, and they had perfectly fine lives. And as human beings, they were still wonderful human beings, but they kind of weren't trying to make the world a better place. They were basically making money and having a good time, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't exactly like what I expected from them when I, gave them copies of Mind Magic and spent hours and days and weeks and so on, spend time with them to see what we could do. And then, here we are today. Now, today, the threats present in the world today are momentous compared to anything that we've experienced in our lifetimes. I remember when I was about 10, 12 years old, the big thing was, well, we just invented the atom bomb and the hydrogen bomb, and we're not the only ones who have it. Now we have ICBMs. And now, in class, every day we practice getting under our desks and covering the back of our heads, just in case when the ICBMs was, heading toward Brooklyn, New York.
Wow.
But today it's way beyond that.
Yeah.
Today it's, bio weapons and electronic weapons and computer tech weapons and AI weapons and chemical weapons and radiation weapons and kinetic weapons, of course. There are just tons of weapons and more and more. And it's not just a couple of superpowers. Everybody's got weapons. And it's the first thing a country, any self-respecting banana republic before it, involves itself too much in education or anything, they got to have the weapons. So it's kind of like a tinderbox out there. And, we're still making it better a little bit day to day. And there's a lot of others like us, and especially the younger generations. They're the greatest hope, And we'll see what happens, H.G. Wells said it's a race between education and destruction. And so we're in that race. We're on the education side, and the destruction is on its own side. And we're racing with them. If we can stop the destruction in time, everything's going to be cool. Otherwise, we'll wait it out and build it back up.
I feel like every good movie, though, the good guy always wins. So I have I have hope. I have hope that
Suzanne.
Yeah, exactly. The good guy always wins. So, it's like, call me naive. I think it's that whole focus on the solution, not the problem. I know there's so much going on in the world at the moment, but I know I'm just so focused on worrying about it isn't for me. It's not going to do anything other than focus on the action. What's the solution? How do we move this forward? And I do have hope that together we will win.
I'm feeling pretty good about this year.
Me too. I feel like this year, and I know you need to go now, but this year, I feel like it's going to go quick. I don't know what's coming, but I just feel like it's going to be big and it's going to be quick. So what's your sense? Do you feel the same?
I think it's going to be a happy ending. I think by when the ball drops in Times Square the next time, it's going to be a very, very happy population.
Yeah. I feel it. I don't know. I just feel so excited about this year. I feel like, I just feel like things are going to happen quickly and we're going to look back and be like, whoa. Oh, definitely. Well, Bill, I'll let you go. But fascinating conversations as always. I never really know where we're going to go or where we're going to end up, but we always seem to take it someplace new, don't we?
I think the universe is guiding us, and it all fits together perfectly.
Yeah. One thought leads to another thought. And it was even just when you were saying about being a kid and all these questions, like literally this morning, I'm looking at a slide that has a picture of a kid on it. And it's like 390 questions a day they ask or something like that. So I was like, it all links in. So, well, lovely to speak with you. I'll send you an email. We'll arrange our next one. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you very soon.
Me too.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah. Have a good day. Bye.